is Paul Campbell, and as you said, 8 years ago, I suffered a T12 burst fracture, incomplete spinal cord injury, and the doctors gave me a 3% chance to ever walk again. But with the exoskeleton technology, such as SuitX, I have a 100% chance to walk. And I'm so thankful for the opportunity to participate in this program and the amazing things that SuitX and the rest of the exoskeleton team are doing to further advance movement, exercise, and opportunities like this.
The device is only about 13 kilograms, but Paul will not feel the weight because the weight will go on the ground. All these technologies are actually developed by a lot of young people in 20s, and we believe this is the beginning of the whole new area of creating mobility for people with spinal cord injury, stroke patient, children with CPs, and other mobility disorders.
For anyone that's curious, the process of learning to use an exoskeleton is similar to the process of anyone going through rehabilitation of learning to stand up and walk again. So, for example, anyone who has had an injury has to relearn how to do activities to prepare for walking again. So when someone comes in, we make sure that they're safe to use an exoskeleton and they're safe to start walking. And we practice standing up, balancing, weight shifting, so all the things that you would need to do to be able to learn to walk again. The transition for someone who's not able to walk to be able to take a device like this home is to make sure that they're safe and they're independent and they're able to walk on their own, so that someone doesn't have to be behind them, grabbing them and holding on to them. So in rehabilitation, the goal is to get someone as independent as possible so that they are doing the work on their own without you having to be there to hold on to them.
Anna, do you want to give us an idea of what kind of therapy exercises do you do when people like Paul come to see you, to your hospital, to your facility? What would be the daily routine, and how does it depend on how much expertise, how much skill they have gained over time?
So because, for example, a spinal cord injury is so unique for every person, so you have to be able to gauge how much strength someone has beforehand, and then you guide that person to be able to do as much as they can on their own to train to use the device based on the strength that they have. So for some people, for example, if you have a very high level injury, you don't have any control of your core to be able to hold you up, you don't have control of your legs, and so you are relying solely on the exoskeleton to do the work for you.
So the fact that you use it for rehabilitation, does it mean that they come 1 hour at a time? How long a session would last? And how much they can withstand? Because I guess that not being an expert exactly on the therapy, right? They get pretty exhausted, right?
Yeah.
How does it work?
It's exercise. So for most people, physical therapy sessions generally last approximately an hour, and so currently that's how long our training sessions last. But that transition is that it should extend from beyond just those training sessions to someone being able to use it throughout the day.
Okay, so we know that St. David's Hospital here is one of the pioneering facilities to facilitate these kind of services. How widespread is using robotic exoskeletons across the nation or across the world? Could you give us an idea?
It is still a fairly new technology, so some hospitals have adopted exoskeletons into their, say, spinal cord injury departments. But however, because it is still a new technology, then it is not uniform across all the hospitals.
We're going to give an applause to these guys. First of all, Paul Campbell and Dr. Kazerooni, Dr. Sternin. Thank you for this wonderful demo. It's very, very impressive. Dr. Latorre, so you are an expert on treating patients using exoskeletons, which is quite revolutionary, to be honest, even to people like myself. So can you let us know what are the increased risks that people face with injuries with extensive use of wheelchairs, injured patients? What are the risks that they face?
Sure. Well, just think about when we're sitting for a prolonged period of time and we try to stand. Our bodies are stiff, our muscles shorten. It might be painful to stand and walk again. Think about somebody who has to use a wheelchair for years. So the muscles tend to shorten when we use a wheelchair for a prolonged period of time, and you can develop a condition called a contraction, which is when the joint doesn't move along its normal range of motion. Patients can have also severe spasticity. So if we can come up with a way to stand and walk, that's going to combat this spasticity that patients with spinal injury and other conditions commonly have. If you think about the bones need some stress in order for them to remain strong. If we're not standing and putting some stress on the bones, then they're going to thin. The calcium is going to be reabsorbed from the bones, and that can lead to conditions, osteopenia or osteoporosis, which are more severe case. That can lead to fractures and complications from that. You have a fracture, you can have a clot, you can have a wound. So that's in the musculoskeletal system. If you think about the skin, for instance, patients with spinal injury don't have normal sensation. Mm-hmm. So if they're sitting in a wheelchair, they might not feel that the bones are pushing on the skin and causing some potential damage. So the risk of bed sores or pressure ulcers in the buttocks area is high with wheelchair use. There's other problems with chronic wheelchair use. If you think about the limited exercise opportunities these patients have, they tend to gain weight, the fatty tissue increases, patients can have problems with glucose intolerance, so they can eventually develop diabetes. And the cardiovascular system, again, because of the limited exercises that patients with chronic wheelchair have, they tend to develop heart disease and strokes. As a matter of fact, it was recently noted that the main cause of mortality in spinal cord injury patients who are wheelchair users is cardiovascular disease. So just imagine if we can get out of the wheelchair and allow them to stand and walk, we can potentially decrease these serious conditions. The other thing is patients with spinal cord injury have also problems with sphincter control. So they might need to do like a bowel regimen or need to be catheterized to drain the bowel and the bladder. There's many reports that show some significant improvements in the bowel regularity in patients who are able to use exoskeletal technology.
Thank you, Dr. Latorre. Clearly, exos are mitigating factors. So let me go to the next question. What are the particular ways that exoskeletons help those patients, those precisely you described now with mobility problems? How they help them?
Well, I think the main thing that this exoskeletal technology provides is just a promise for patients who are wheelchair users to be able to stand, look at their peers at the eye level, being able to walk and exercise, and also perform activities from a standing position. I mean, the psychological benefits of that plus the physical benefits is something that you cannot really quantify. I think it would be priceless to be able to use more widespread these devices.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So can anybody use these exos? Educate us, please. How about age, type of injury, type of disease? Who is eligible for using this kind of therapy, rehabilitating therapy among our populations?
Well, that's a great question. And spinal cord injury and gait dysfunction is not just happening in adults. Of course, the pediatric population is a population that has to be considered. Dr. Kazerooni mentioned cerebral palsy. Cerebral palsy is the most prevalent cause of physical disability in childhood, happening in 2 to 3 kids out of 1,000. And the challenge with these kids with cerebral palsy is the crouch gait, and they can develop spasticity and contractures and problems. So if we can institute this technology early on, you could argue that you can potentially prevent some of these complications we see in cerebral palsy. Patients with spina bifida, same thing. The challenge with the pediatric population is that the devices need to accommodate to their body. And as they grow, you need to have some adjustability that can accommodate to a growing skeleton. So not everybody can benefit from the use of these devices. As you saw Paul, he has a strong upper body, he uses his arms. Spinal cord injury doesn't happen just where your legs are paralyzed. You can have a neck injury and then your arms are going to be paralyzed as well. And of course, a device like this cannot be used for somebody with that type of injury. There's other devices, however, that allow the user to stand and the device itself self-balance and just with a joystick. So there's devices out there that can be used for patients who are quadriplegic. But you have strokes, spinal cord injuries, multiple sclerosis, spina bifida, cerebral palsy, and just the normal aging population. I mentioned that as we age, potentially a similar device like this, or robotic suits that can potentially be used, may be the wave of the future to help us just live not just a longer life, but a more productive one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. So one last question for you. I think some people imagine that we're going to wear these devices 24/7, or when we are, we wake up with them on, but that's not the case today. What is preventing that from happening? And do we see an immediate future where you wake up in the morning and you put it on, and it's just, you have the strength to carry on for the whole day and have those benefits?
I mean, I think we could potentially get there. I think the other issue we have with these devices is that they require an extensive training period. So you have your cognitive abilities to be able to use it. Some patients with strokes or traumatic brain injuries may not be cognitively able to learn the use of these devices. So I think what we need to do is the technology needs to improve, and it needs to be tailored to those conditions. But even if it's for, say, an hour, couple of times a week, that can prove to be beneficial to prevent some of the serious complications I mentioned. I don't think we're quite there yet to replace the wheelchair, but I think this device needs to be more available for many different conditions. We need to continue to do research to drop the price of the device. Dr. Kazerooni mentioned that it can drop to $5,000, which is quite amazing. Some of the other devices available are in the upwards of $70,000 to $100,000 per unit. And the other thing we need to strive to is to allow insurances to cover these devices. They shouldn't be a luxury item. These are medically necessary pieces of equipment that can prevent serious and costly complications.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. I'm now going to switch the attention to Dr. Sternin. So as an expert in physical therapy, you have seen many patients using this revolutionary technology. So in which ways, how is this technology different, the Phoenix, this exo over there, from other medical devices, other medical offerings we help people stand and walk? How is it different?
Currently, most of the devices or most of the medical apparatuses which are offered in the hospital are very bulky. So people have standing frames, for example, to use, or orthotics, which are difficult to put on and are very clunky to work with. And so the challenge becomes that someone either has to have access to an expensive, large device such as a standing frame in a clinical setting in a hospital, or if they go home with orthotics or with other medical devices which they have available for use, they are so difficult to put on and so cumbersome to use during the day that people end up not using them. And so currently devices are either not user-friendly, too expensive, too large. So there is nothing currently consistent available for people to use that gives them the option of moving throughout a room, being able to interact with other people without just having to use something which is very restrictive in some way. And so the future with exoskeletons is that it is something that can be integrated into society. It's something that somebody can stand up and walk throughout a room. They can, talk to people, make eye contact. So it's not something that you're thinking of using just as a medical device. It should just be an accessory that's helping you move in the way that you want to move, and not the primary device or the primary aspect of what you're doing. You shouldn't be thinking about it that much, so that you can concentrate on other things throughout the day.
Absolutely. And it brings you hope. And it's hard work at the same time for people like yourself that are exposed to these patients. So regarding the hard work, the mental work for you, a patient, and so on and so forth, the families, what keeps you going on this field? What inspires you to help push forward this technology and these therapies?
So there are a few things. So one of those things is the fact that this actually takes a lot of burden off of not just the person using the device so that it's easier to use, but also caregivers and physical therapists. So there are people who, especially for those that aren't very independent at all, the person that they're with, it's generally a lot of burden on them to help lift someone, to help move, move equipment, move wheelchairs, move everything else. And so if you have something that all physical burden off of the people that are around them as well, so that life can kind of, start to become normal again. One of the other things is that, what's very amazing about this technology is an injury or a life-changing event can happen to anyone, and so you want to think that, just because you go skiing and you fall and you have a spinal cord injury, that your life should just, stop and completely change course. There should be something to kind of bring you back to the state that you want to be in, so that you don't have to, incur so many medical expenses and all the other aspects that go with an injury. So you should be able to return to some kind of the life that you want. And I mean, the third thing is that this technology is completely amazing. The fact that it's not invasive and it's not, eventually it'll be low cost, and it's something that somebody can put on and engage in the life that they want to have. When somebody goes from sitting in a wheelchair to standing up, it's amazing, and the fact that it can be easy for them and effortless. The fact that technology has come so far and is moving in this direction is what's so inspirational, and that is completely worth all the hard work that goes into it.
So the Phoenix, which is part of this answer to this problem, is an untethered device. There's other tethered devices out there, but perhaps the Phoenix allows you not only the benefits, the therapy benefits, but is the hope that because you can eventually wear it anywhere, you can regain the lifestyle you had before. Would you say that that's the case?
Correct, or the lifestyle that you want. So of course, after an injury or after something happens, you have to adjust to a new normal. But you always want to have options after something happens, and something like this just gives you more options with what you can do, so that you can make that choice. And as Dr. Latorre mentioned, we're not there yet with replacing wheelchairs, but this at least offers another option for someone, so that they're able to they have other options in life.
So it looks like it's an easy thing, everybody benefits, but I'm sure there is many challenges. There's probably mental challenges, training challenges, and that's a kind of result is how people respond. So what is your experience of how people respond over time? How do you overcome those challenges to wearing exoskeletons for rehabilitation?
The challenges are similar to other challenges that come with rehabilitation. So when someone is first learning to walk again or to do anything, it takes a while for your body to adjust to it. And so sometimes, we see technology, and sometimes people think, oh, I'll this is here, so I'll be able to use it right away and stand up and walk. But there is a learning curve with anything new that you do, and that's a fairly minor challenge. The more efficient that someone gets with doing something, the easier it is. So as far as training, that's just one of the main challenges, and that's something normal with rehabilitation and learning something new.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sternin. We're going to now switch to Dr. Kazerooni. You have been a visionary in developing and commercializing exoskeletons in the US and around the world. So the first question for you is how does somebody like you get started with that field, with the Phoenix? And I'm guessing the ancestor devices, this long line of devices, how did you get started in your field?
Well, it all started as a research project to create devices that work with people, to create robotic devices that work with people rather than replacing for industrial application. And at some point we realized the application can be used for people with mobility disorders. And we started with spinal cord injury patients, and then we moved on. Now we're going to have devices for stroke patients and others. But it was a research project, but now it's changed. It's intertwined with our lives. We have a passionate team now. It was again engineering project, but now it's a part of our daily work, and we're very lucky to be able to actually do that stuff. And it's just the beginning, and I hope this inspires a lot of young people to continue this field and push the frontier farther. So we can get more people included in this field.
And you are an engineer, correct?
Yes, I am.
So how does it connect? What is the connection between engineering, going from the device and perfecting them, and then to all the way to connecting to the therapy, the benefits, the medical arena? What is that transition? How does it happen?
Well, it's always easy to work in the vacuum of your office and do isolated engineering work and develop things. But at the end of the day, we professors or academics, we have to come down from the ivy tower and develop the technology as you do it yourself for benefit of people. So I don't really see much of a difference from what I've been doing before. It's a part of education. We're educating people at universities, and then we're also creating technologies. So that justifies creating engineers, sort of sustain the technology, and then we have to push it so people can use it. We have to push it further and be in contact with physicians to tell us what they need. So to me, it's a whole community going around. So degrees don't matter if you're an engineer or a physician or whatever it is. It's a matter of solving a human problem. I remember that in long time ago when I was a kid, we put human in the moon, right? That was, to me, is a big deal, and it still is a big deal. It still is a big deal. I can't imagine we actually did that. So creating technologies for our fellow citizens to be upright and mobile, if you can't do it, it's a sin. I mean, this is something is embedded in us and we have to do it. There are a lot of children out there that they have no say in what happened to them, children with CP, with all kinds. And we have a responsibility to get them upright and mobile, to be included, to finish a school. So this kind of attitude, this kind of thinking is in our company. It is among people we work with. That's fundamental. That is the prereq. And then engineering and talents and everything else will start. So we see that as a responsibility and also an honor to be able to actually provide that for our brothers and sisters and children who need a little bit of help to have a better quality of life and education. That's what we're thinking.
Well, you well deserve being called a pioneer. Thank you so much for this inspiration and initiation. Populations are aging, pyramids are changing, we're living longer. Sometimes I like to think about this as life after mobility, whether it's injury or age. So there is a market out there, clearly, and we see your company thriving and other players. How far is it going to go along within a few years, within 10, 20 years? How big are those markets? How is the technology going to look like?
So the way I see this technology is a doorway to bring rehabilitation to home. When I see, as Dr. Latorre mentioned, for example, when we bring a subject for rehabilitation to the rehab center 1 hour a week, and that's not a sufficient dosage, and it's a burden on the subject, the patient, it is a burden on the parents, caregivers, spouse, and it's 1 hour only. So we're thinking about bringing rehabilitation home, and that requires major infrastructure. Not only the device had to be able to be working at home, but also you need to have a lot of infrastructure as far as data had to be transferred to the physician at the hospital. So there is a lot going on that we're thinking about it, how you create that rehabilitation at home and at school. So you bring that process to the patients rather than they get on a taxi and come to the rehab center, which to me is really primitive, at this time. So I feel it's just like your cell phone. Cell phone is pretty strong now. You brought it home. Used to be for enterprises, but now you bring it home. Right? The same thing. We're hoping that technology comes home, so you don't really have to go many places. Many places, rehab places, are pretty far from the cities, and people don't have access. So that's a bigger vision that we think how the rehabilitation should eventually happen. And of course, we're all struggling to push that technology. This is just not about the hardware. It's a lot of software, infrastructure, communication. As you just noticed, this machine has two computers. One is running the machine. The other one is communicating with a little iPad that records every information that he has. So that information would be accessible by a physician through a cloud. So we're getting to that point of creating a situation that you bring all that technology to home rather than bring a patient back to the rehab center. I mean, I don't know how long it's going to happen. I hope sometime I'll be able to see it, but that's the vision we're having.
So, in terms of the challenges, let's focus on two challenges: legal and what we call in our fields international standards. So clearly, those are barriers for adoption of those devices outside of a hospital setup. Can you tell us how much effort is being done legally and in standards, for instance, for having these every day being used at home?
Well, they're not being used at home at all. At least our device is not being used. We haven't even passed the FDA, so we're dreaming. I'm a dreamer. We're just thinking about the future, how it's going to happen here. As far as the standards, there are some standards out there, but I think those are actually also premature. Technology is still very in infancy. Things are going to continue more and more, and I'm not sure how those standards will impact the future because the standards are rather basic. But I might actually tell you about bottlenecks, perhaps. The bottlenecks for use of these devices at home are actually in terms of number one is prices. Insurance has to pay for it. Number two, as far as technology, this is still not good enough for our taste. We still have a whole list of product map that we have to go through. As you notice here, for example, when Paul is walking, we were spotting him. We want to drop the likelihood of a fall or any kind of injury down to zero. And we have some very, very interesting technologies coming up next year. We need to make everything rather smart and compact. And all of those are going to take some time. And so life hasn't been easy for us. We keep doing it, but I think it's going to happen within 5 to 10 years.
Thank you. So one last question for you. You are the first person I see bringing the economics of these devices down to $5,000. It's amazing. But I want to know how you're going to achieve that. And I think you have already a lot of it. So if you can walk us through of how much simplified you have made Phoenix and how you're going to go down that path.
One of the way to bring the price of anything down is to basically remove things out of it. So most of you drive cars, the more you add into it, the more features you put into it. Of course, people enjoy it, but the price will go higher and higher. Now, of course, that's not a challenge for the engineers or designers. The challenge is to give a good performance with lowest price. To me, that's a very difficult thing to do. So what we did here, we removed as much as sensors we could, because sensors, they may not be expensive by themselves, but eventually once you put them in the device, it reduces robustness, it might fail. You need wires and connectors and computers, everything you need. So we try to remove sensors and use intelligent systems that actually estimate rather than measure things. So we have ground reaction force sensors, is all gone. We have power sources at the knee, and then they require more hardware, again, wires and connectors and amplifiers and many infrastructure. It's all gone. Now we have a lot of tricks on a computer and also the hip actuators. We're going to drop that too. So basically, we're trying to create something out of nothing. We're trying to make a very high performance but low cost technology. And you guys know it's sort of contradict each other. But we have a responsibility. We need to do that. And it's possible to do that. I have seen many technologies that are actually being offered at low price, but the quantity was very high, and that would make sense for many people. In this case, the quantity may not be high, but we have a responsibility, so it makes sense for us. And we will be able to do that, and that's really one of the purpose of this talk here, to inspire a lot of people that creating very high-performance bionic devices for people with mobility disorders and children is possible and can be done.
Just a second. So one last question. I'm sure we have young people here that they want to work in companies like yours in bionics. So how does somebody become a bionic engineer, a bionic kinesiologist? What kind of education and what kind of prospects for career they might expect?
Well, as you know, many technologies that you see here are multidisciplinary. Includes engineering, includes field of medicine, includes rehabilitation, computer science, mechanical engineering, electrical. So they all come together. There is no more Superman. You know, you can't make things in your garage and you say, well, you know, I dreamed about it last night and I made it the next morning. None of these true. So the whole idea is to collaborate, obviously. And any of these fields, you can help. You know, you can start from being an engineering or a mathematician, physics, medicine, and you can go forward. And, you know, many technologies in there I do not know. And I'll rely on my colleagues to teach me and I go forward. And many things I know and I keep adding into it. So it's all about collaboration and working together to create this technology. For young people, going to high school and college and just starting from math and physics, that's really it. I don't have any secret sauce to tell you here, and life hasn't been again easy. It's just like you work hard at it until it happens.
Okay, let's give a strong applause to the panel for this introspection into the medical, therapeutical, and technology of robotic exoskeletons for rehabilitation. And we have now about 9 minutes, perhaps 8, for the audience here to ask questions. So please ask everything you wanted to know in these wonderful technologies, and do so by standing and using this microphone here in the center. Please go ahead, spend quality time. These guys are all available right now. Direct questions to them.
Thank you for inspiring demo and talks. One very simple question with SuitX. It seems you're also developing industrial exoskeleton. I see on the website some on the back of different workers. Does it mean your focus is now squarely on...
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
You're also developing industrial exoskeletons on your website. I see different models. Are you more now focusing on the rehabilitation side, or you see some parallels in the technology, the underlying platforms, or the baseline for both aspects, the digital side and rehabilitation side?
So the question that he is asking is relating to industrial exoskeletons that we have developed. Those devices are completely different with the medical exoskeletons that you just noticed here. Those are not medical devices. Those are devices that reduce the risk of injury. So they reduce the compression force in the spine during the bending, they reduce knee joint forces during squatting. And these are the works that workers do. They put their bodies into abuse all day long. I'm very lucky to sit in front of a computer, do analysis or something. And that's rather easy. But those guys, 8 hours a day in a very harsh environment, they work very hard. So we were designing very low-cost, accessible sort of thing, exoskeletons to reduce the risk of injuries. And those are the very first bionic devices that they become safety devices, because right now the safety devices are hard hat, protection, glasses and also steel toes. So we're moving toward use of bionics for workers, and they're different from these devices. They are going parallel together. We might use some of the technologies, but we're not pushing on that. We're trying to use that technology that is suitable for workers' environment, which is different than home environment.
Thank you.
I get asked a lot of questions, but I'll just start with one. How can we help with legislation and getting these to more people at home? So I know that's a big problem. Like, my girlfriend was spinal cord injury, and they're not sure if her insurance will approve. I think it's Rewalk is the name of the brand. So, like, what can people outside of this industry do to help?
Well, I think you have to become really vocal, because I see that problem all the time, not just with these devices, but covering wheelchairs, covering bathroom equipment. It's a hassle. And insurance companies are not approving devices that are medically necessary because they think that they're not. So I think family members need to become very vocal, and we need to just write to the congressman and just make sure that they hear the people, that we're angry about it, because it's just not fair that devices that should be medically necessary are not, and are not covered by insurance. A lot of my patients go through hell to trying to get just basic stuff covered, and that's just not fair. So we all need to just raise our voices and write to our congressmen and let them know we're not happy about it.
Thank you.
Hi, I have just a real quick question for Dr. Kazerooni. You mentioned you're still working your way through the FDA process with this particular device, and I just wondered if you could provide any kind of, I know it's really hard when it comes to FDA, there's no crystal ball, but if you could provide a projected timeline for when you think you might have it.
Yeah, I'm working with Anna, my colleague here. She has done all the clinical work, most of it. We're doing clinical work in several centers. We're almost done, including Dr. Latorre is one of our, his facility is one of our sites for our clinical work evaluation. So, and then we also have some other regulatory work we have to do. We think by the end of 2018, we would have FDA approval, crossing our fingers.
Thank you.
So I have a quick question for you, Dr. Kazerooni. What is, and Dr. Latorre, everyone here, Sternin as well, what is the state of the art now of adopting new sensory, anticipating the intention of the patient through forces or through electromyography? That's one side of the sensing. And on the other hand, we have other forms of actuation, one of them being functional stimulation, where you pass on current to voltages to your muscles and you activate them. Is that something we're going to see on those devices? What is your feeling? Electromyography, functional stimulation. What is the cost associated with these technologies and the maturity of these technologies?
Well, I can speak on the functional electrical stimulation.
Yes,
I think
please.
there's been some research studies that have tried to incorporate this technology with putting electrodes in your muscles and allow, because this device that you see there is not stimulating the muscle in the sense that it's not making it contract. It's just ranging it through the normal range of motion of joints. The problem is, as Dr. Kazerooni mentioned, the more stuff you add to these devices, the more cost you're going to add to them.
Of course.
So I think eventually it'd be nice to see the prices come down also on functional stimulation, so you can combine the both of them, because I think there's definitely a patient population that can benefit from both.
Okay. And regarding EMG, electromyography, is that a sensory mode that can improve the transparency of these devices? Any of you have to say that?
The question that you are raising, if I may rephrase that, is about how do you make this machine walk? What is the human intention? How is the human intention is measured, make him walk or stand? So there are many ways of doing it. The simplest form is like push button, which Paul had. There are other sensory also that you can measure basically the tilt. As you tilt, for example, steps are generated. Or we can measure the ground reaction force when you tilt left and right. You can also generate steps. There are also research going on how to use, to actually use brain-machine interface to generate the steps. And of course, as you mentioned here, there are also possibilities that you use EMG signals. A good friend of mine in Japan, Dr. Sankai, is actually doing it. He's measuring EMG signal to generate. We call that all of those. And another one is that I like is voice activated, like go, no go, stop. All of these are categorized under human-machine interface. How do you tell the machine do what you want it to do? And future will come. There are many ways of doing that stuff, and we try to separate that from the machine itself. So if the machine stands here, but the human-machine interface can be changed, and depending on the person can choose a variety of that. Right now, we have the simplest form. And also, there's a huge difference between technology and a product. Product can be sold. It has to be functional for the user. Absolutely work, does the job. technology is something that we should represent, that what we can do as human, and there are huge difference between them, and it takes a long time to move from technology to actual product. So many of those will come, as you mentioned here, and I'm not in any position to say which one is good, because it really depends on the physician choice and how they use that stuff. But let me give you an example. For a person who wants to be upright and mobile, we found out you just have to stand up, number 1, walk, number 2, stop, number 3, and sit, number 4. So like 4 languages you have to tell the machine. Of course, there are many more, but minimum of these, right? So is there any way we can convey that these 4 concepts to the machine in a robust form that becomes a product? Very simple, low cost. So more intelligence on the machine to figure out these 4 things, so the machine would faithfully does. That's one way. Another one, as Dr. Latorre said, we can actually basically stimulate the muscles, or perhaps measure EMG or anything else. So I'm not biased on any of those at all. All of those will come, but that is the function of physician's recommendation and a person, what is needed. At the end of the day, I'm an engineer. We provide technologies and a product eventually, so the physicians can prescribe that for a variety of subjects.
Well, there is so many other questions I personally have, and I'm sure here, this man machine and the fact that wearing these devices in this very intimate sense, but we'll have to leave them for our next presentation, hopefully soon. So we're gonna thank you very much, first of all, to Paul Campbell for his strong effort over here, Dr. Kazerooni, the technologist, Dr. Latorre, the medical expert, and Dr. Sternin, our therapist. So thank you very much.
Thank you.